We are starting. Okay? Arlo, get out of here. You can say. This is what we do every day. It's really exciting. All right. Here we go. Constitution. Okay? Constitution is the law of the United States. Page 1 of the packet is going to give you a basic outlook of checks and balances, of how it works, of the different branches. Okay? The government is set up, the Constitution, as a limited government. Okay? The Constitution is designed to set up things that the government can do. It's not everything in the world. Okay? So it is not unlimited. Unlimited government would be what the king had. Okay? We have in the United States federalism. Okay? The federal system is the concept of the national government and the state governments working together. All right, so we talked about in class earlier today. So you have these groups that work together. The national government, the federal government, will trump the state government, though. Okay? So if there is a state law and a national law, right? If the state says one thing is legal and the national law says that it is illegal, that makes it illegal. An example of something that's not working with is if we look at marijuana right now. Marijuana is legal in certain states, but it is illegal federally. The reason why that's happening is the federal government has said they are not going to prosecute it. But if the federal government changed their mind and said we're going to now prosecute all marijuana dealers, right? They could do that because the federal law trumps the national law. Okay? Checks and balances are designed to make sure that one branch of government does not have too much power over another branch. So they make sure that they are covering each other. We talked about that in class, the idea of with the Supreme Court, and we'll look at some of those checks as we get moving forward. Okay? Questions about that?
So it's make sure one branch isn't between.
Correct. All right? Okay, Constitution itself. It starts out with the preamble. Okay? The preamble of the Constitution is the mission statement of the Constitution. It is a broad outline of what we want to do. You can see it on page 5 of the packet. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. It is broad. It does not have any specific things in it. It's sort of the general stuff that we want to do. Okay? Okay. Legislative branch. The legislative branch is going to have 2 houses. Okay? You are going to have the House of Representatives and you are going to have the Senate. Talked about that today. Okay? The purpose of the legislative branch is to make laws. Right? That is their job. We'll start with the House. Okay? The House will have 435 members. They will serve a 2-year term. So every election, all 435 members of the House are up for re-election. Okay, so every member of the House of Representatives is up for re-election on November 6th. Okay? In order to be in the House, you must be 25. You must have been a citizen for 7 years. And you must live in the state you represent. You do not have to actually live in the district that you represent. But you can imagine if you are trying to run for the 3rd district and you live in the 6th district of Minnesota, the members of the 3rd district might not think that you necessarily represent everything that they're good for, right? The head of the House of Representatives is the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House comes from the party that is in control of the House. So the Speaker of the House right now is a Republican, and that person is whom? Paul Ryan. Okay, he is stepping down. So we will have a new Speaker in the next Congress. Yeah.
Is the speaker a representative, or is he just someone chosen from like elsewhere?
He is a representative from the political party that is in power. Okay, so if the Democrats take the House, as they are expected to do, it is thought that Nancy Pelosi will become the Speaker of the House. She's a Democrat, but they could select someone else that is chosen by the political party that is in power. Okay. Number of representatives. It is based on population of each state. Okay. Every state is guaranteed at least one member of the House. So that is the least you can have. I think California has, I want to say 50? 52? Something. You got a bunch, right? So there's a big difference in there. Okay. And this is determined every 10 years based on the census. So in 2020, we'll have our next census. And depending on how population has shifted in states, states will either lose or gain representatives in the House. Okay, but it always stays at 435. So if Minnesota's population was to drop quite a bit, we would lose a representative and another state would gain a representative. Okay, that's every 10 years. Okay? Yeah.
435 total.
435 members of the House. Yes. Okay.
So every 10 years, the census is taken and it around.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Is there a reason for 435?
It is it's a ratio they came up with based on population. I think that's where they've been for quite a while. So yeah.
Does DC count?
Washington D.C. has no members of the House or the Senate, but they do have electoral votes. Okay, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay. Jobs of the House. Okay. Most important is that they can propose tax laws. So tax laws come out of the House. Okay. And then the other thing is they have the power to impeach the president. So one of the things we've been hearing about with the upcoming elections that the Democrats take the House, will they attempt to impeach the president? This is a check on the power of the president, that they can be impeached. Questions about the House? Okay, we're on page 7 in the packet, if you are following along there. Next, we have the Senate. Okay, the Senate will have 100 members, 2 per state. Okay, senators are serving a 6-year term. Okay, so every election, 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election. Okay, so 33 or 34. This year in Minnesota, we have both of our senators up for re-election. And the reason that is, we said in class, is because Tina Smith and Karen Housley are going for Al Franken's Senate seat, because Al Franken had to step down because of sexual misconduct allegations. So they are actually running to finish Franken's term. So whoever wins that will get 2 years, and then they will have to run again in 2020. Klobuchar, who is running right now, who is very likely going to win, she will be elected in 2018 and will serve until 2024. Okay? So you get a 6-year term there. In order to be in the Senate, you have to be 30. So 5 years older than the House. Okay? You have to have been a U.S. citizen for 9 years. And you must live in state. Okay? So example of this, Hillary Clinton. After Bill Clinton wasn't president anymore, they moved to New York, and she became a senator from New York, even though she had lived in Washington, D.C. and in Arkansas before that. But because she was a resident of New York, she was able to do that. Okay? Roles of the leader of the Senate is the vice president. Okay, so Mike Pence is the president of the Senate. He will only vote, though, if there is a tie. There has to be a tie in order for the vice president to vote. Yeah.
Does he count as one of those 100
No.
members?
Nope. Okay. Roles of the Senate. Okay. They can really. Great. So, roles of the Senate. Okay. They can approve presidential appointments. Okay, so Kavanaugh, right? Kavanaugh was appointed by the president, and the Senate was able to have the hearings in order to ratify that. Okay, that's their job. Okay, they ratify treaties with a foreign government. President makes a treaty, Senate ratifies a treaty. They also try impeachment. So we said the House impeaches the president. If the House impeaches the president, then it goes to the Senate in order to try it. If the Senate finds the president guilty of impeachment, they will be removed from power. In American history, we have had 2 presidents that have been impeached. Anyone know who they are? Clinton, not Nixon.
He stepped down.
Nixon resigned. Anyone know who the other one was?
A long time ago.
It was a long time ago. It was Andrew Johnson, who followed Lincoln. Both presidents were impeached. Both presidents were found not guilty by the Senate. So because they were found not guilty by the Senate, they were able to continue serving as president. Okay?
So no president has ever been.
Convicted of impeachment. Nixon very likely would have been convicted. So Nixon was given 48 hours to resign, or he was going to be impeached. 24 or 48, I don't remember. But that's why he resigned, in order to avoid this. Okay? So he was on his way to having that happen.
What did he do?
Nixon, he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll talk Nixon in full detail a little bit later on.
No president has like publicly been impeached.
None have been convicted of impeachment. Clinton was not found guilty. So he was impeached, but he was not found guilty, so that's why he was able to finish out his presidency. Okay? Okay. Questions about that? You put the House and the Senate together, and you have the Congress, where there are 535 members. Okay?
Is this the legislative branch?
Not as the legislative branch. Okay? These guys, as a group, out of each house. Okay? What's that? Yep. So you take the House and the Senate together, you put them together, and then you have the Congress. Okay? Either house. Okay? Either the House or the Senate. They can propose laws. They can declare war. We have not declared war since the Korean War. We've never declared a war since then. So, for example, if we talk about Afghanistan or Iraq, if you hear it, it's Operation so and so, right? Because it's not technically a declared war. Okay. They can.
I thought Congress declared war after the 9/11 attack.
Nope.
And what happened there? Did they just deploy troops?
It came from the president. It was a presidential.
It was a president.
Yep. They can override a presidential veto with a 2/3 vote. So if the president vetoes a law, goes back to the Congress, if 2/3 of them agree to it, they will override the presidential veto. That's check on the president. Okay? And they can propose an amendment to the Constitution with the 2/3 vote. Now, imagine Congress agreeing on something that would be a constitutional amendment where 2/3 of them would agree to something. It's hard to fathom, right? This is why changing the Constitution is so challenging. Okay? It's a really hard thing to do. Questions about that? All right. How to make a law. Okay, we're on page 9 of the packet, if you are there. Okay. So, the way it works, okay, is that a bill starts in one house, okay, either in the House or the Senate, okay, and then it gets passed by a majority vote.
Wait, is this for a law?
For a law. Okay? So it is passed by a majority vote. Okay? It then, so let's say this one starts in the House. It then goes to the Senate. Okay? And if they pass it with a majority vote,
It can start in the House or the Senate?
yeah, unless it's a tax law. Tax law must start in the House.
Then it just goes to the other one?
Yep, goes to the other one. Okay, and in the middle of there is what's called committee, where they're discussing different, they're negotiating stuff, right? It then goes to the president. Okay, if the president signs it, it becomes a law. Okay, and that's it. If the president vetoes it, it goes back to Congress. Once it goes back to Congress, if they do a 2/3 vote, that's the override, and it becomes a law. If they do not get that 2/3, bill is dead. No law.
They try to repropose it.
And then you could try to repropose it. Yep. So if they have a different president, if you have a different house, whatever it ends up being,
Could you try again like the next day?
you could. But the theory is the president is going to veto it the first time. You're not going to have. So a good example of this, if you're looking at a state or a federal government, if you're looking at the state, right? Right now, Minnesota has a Republican legislature, and Mark Dayton is a Democrat, right? Dayton has said many times that he will veto any abortion bill, right? Any pro-life abortion bill, right? So they could pass bill after bill after bill after bill saying abortion should be illegal, and Dayton will just continue to veto it. So it doesn't do them any good to waste their time doing that. All right, questions about that? Good? All right, almost done. So, what we have, okay, section 8, this would be on page 10, are called the enumerated powers of Congress.
Is this
Okay.
still legislative?
Yep, this is all legislative today. Okay, all legislative. It lists specifically what they're able to do. Okay, sort of the things that we have talked about. Okay, couple of things that I want to though talk about. The declaration of war. Okay, as we said, you can't declare war, or pardon me, the Congress has to declare war. But we have done other things, right, where we've gone to war without declaring it. The reason that happens is because Congress must approve spending on the military. Okay, so if the president sends troops into war, the Congress must say we're going to give them money to do that. If the Congress says we're not going to give you money, they can't do it. Now, you can imagine, though, what happens politically there. If Trump says, I want to go attack, or let's say under George Bush after 9/11, he says, I want to go attack Afghanistan because they bombed us on 9/11, right? If the Congress says no to that, then George Bush says you're not being patriotic, right? So there's a game that goes in there to make sure that everyone can follow along, right? Important to note the elastic clause, all right? The elastic clause is the clause in the Constitution that allows for the legislative branch to have freedom to do things that are not specifically listed in there, right? Elastic stretches.
Wait, allows what?
The legislative branch to do things that are not specifically listed in there, okay? So for example, you watch television, okay? The FCC, the people who determine what can be on television and what can't be on television, right? The government takes that power, okay? Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the government can regulate what's on television. It would have been very difficult to have put that in the Constitution in 1787, right? But the elastic clauses allow them the ability to do this, okay?
So it kind of adapts as time goes on.
Right. It makes it a living, breathing Constitution. Now, what we'll see is that if the Congress tries to do something that is a little bit too much, that's where the Supreme Court comes in, where they're interpreting the laws, right? That's where they have that power.
So it's the freedom to do things that aren't specifically stated where?
In the enumerated clause. So if you look on page 10 of the Constitution, they have this: the Congress shall have power, and it lists 18 things that the Congress can do. Okay? The elastic clause says that if it's not listed in that 18, you still might have the power to do it. And it's up to the Supreme Court to determine whether or not that is accurate or not. Okay? What they cannot do, okay? They cannot have a foreign policy on their own. Or pardon me, when they talk about lasting the legislative branch, it talks about limits on the states. Okay? And what the states cannot do is they cannot have a foreign policy on their own. So Minnesota can't have its own foreign policy with Canada. Right? We have to have a national foreign policy. They can't have their own currency. So we can't have the Minnesota dollar. Okay? And we can't have taxes that are specific to our state. Right? So we can't tax another state or another country specifically.
Wait, what does that deal with the elastic?
That's not the elastic. That's just the limits on states that are in the legislative branch. Okay? Okay. That's the legislative branch. We have covered the roles of the House and the Senate. We've talked about the checks that they have on the president, right? We've talked about the checks they have on each other, that they have to each pass laws, right? Not one branch can't pass on their own. Okay? Any questions you guys have right now? Okay, let's stop this. Did it not record? Son of a...
Oh, yeah.
Did it not record?
No, it didn't.
Oh.
Ooh.